Good evening, St. Mark family. And we are today celebrating Maunday, Thursday, the day in which Jesus gave two mandates, two commands. The first, to love one another as he loved us. And secondly, to take and eat the body and blood of Christ. But today I'd like to begin by using your imagination. I'd like you to imagine that when this is all over, the quarantine's all over, and you're on your way out the door for the first time, and you take a deep breath. But before you can turn around, suddenly there's a person that shows up and draws even closer than 6 feet to you. And she's a woman. She's sporting a large feathered hat on her head and a large button that says, Lutherans do it with grace. And she looks pretty much like everybody else, except that she's got these wings behind her that are flapping and keeping her about six inches off the ground. And she's got a LBW tucked under one arm and a bulletin tucked under the other cup of coffee and a cup of coffee in this hand, and a copy of a large magic wand in this hand. And you realize that you have come face to face with the church fairy. And she looks at you sweetly and smiles and says, "You've been good. I mean, here it is, Thursday, and you're listening to a sermon. I want to reward you for your discipleship. I want to give to your church one thing that you'd like for your church more than anything else." And boy, that kind of opportunity doesn't come around, so you have to think about it and finally think, well, maybe it's a bus. If we had a bus, the rockers could go anywhere they wanted to for free. And or maybe it's a gym. You know, we'd have a huge youth group if we had a basketball program. And no, I know. What if we would have a really eloquent preacher? You know, even more than Pastor Jay. Somebody like Dwight L. Moody, or Billy Graham, or St. Paul for that matter. And the church fairy steps back and says, "You think it's possible that you could have a preacher more inspiring than Pastor Jay?" But it doesn't matter, because already you're thinking about something else. And you're thinking, I know, suddenly like a burst of, it hits you like a brick, about what would be your best wish for your church. And you think back to what St. Paul said when he said, love one another. Make love the goal of your life, he says in 1 Corinthians 13. And you remember the great commandment that Jesus gave on Maunday, Thursday. This commandment I have given you, that you ought to love one another as I have loved you. And so you say, that's it. I think that's what I want for our church above everything else, is love. Because that's what Christ wants for his church. That everyone would love one another. And the church fairy smiled and said, chosen wisely you have. Because love is what the Christian life is all about. Dr. Wynne Arnn of the Institute for the American Church Growth took a survey of almost 9,000 people, 39 different denominations. And he found that most churches that are growing today have learned how to love. That's the one thing that all growing churches have in common. He said there's increasing evidence that none of the traditional approaches to church growth influence a congregational growth or decline as significantly as how much love and acceptance people experience when they attend. Some years ago, Dwight Moody wrote this. He said, show me a church where there's love, and I'll show you a church that's making a difference in the community. He told a story about a young boy in Chicago who attended a Sunday school that he knew of. And when his parents moved to a different part of the city, the little boy kept walking now from the house which was further away to go back to the same church. And he asked him, why don't, there's a lot of good churches between here and there, why don't you find a church closer to your home? And the little boy said, because at this church, they know how to love a person. The one thing that attracts people above all to church is love. And to Christ is love. I know that because it's been true in my experience. When I think of all the people that have had the biggest impression on me, it wasn't just the pastors, although I've had some good ones. It's the people who touched my life and affected me most are the people who took time for me, or who listened to me, or who included me, or who made a deliberate effort to reach out to me, who made me feel wanted or needed, who invited me. The people who were the people who were influential in my life were those that loved me. And hasn't that also been true in your life? Love is the one thing above everything else that attracts people to Jesus Christ. And like our third guiding principle, love changes people. Okay, so that begs the question. Love is such a big word, and we have one word that means so many different things. A good book that you may consider reading if you're home for any extended period of time is C.S. Lewis's book, The Four Loves. And he says that in our culture we have all different kinds of loves. There's romantic love, there's I love my dog, there's I love pizza, there's I love the Cubs, till about the middle of June. And people use love in so many different ways. One young woman wrote a love letter that went like this: Dearest Jimmy, no words could ever express the great unhappiness that I felt ever since I broke up our engagement. No one could ever take your place in my heart. So please, please forgive me. I love you, I love you, I love you. Marie. And P.S. And congratulations on winning the Illinois State Lottery. The young woman obviously was using the word love in a way that was somehow different than the way Jesus had in mind. What is exactly this thing called Christian love? The Greeks called it agape love, self-giving love, sacrificial love. First off, it's a commandment. It's one of the two mandates of Holy Thursday. On Maunday, Thursday, Jesus said, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you." Now that poses a problem. How can anybody, even Jesus, command somebody else to have a loving feeling? And the answer is you can't. You can't command feelings. They don't respond to commands. Try it for yourself. Cheer up. Stop being so upset. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Calm down. Straighten up. Chill out. Have you noticed that that kind of advice usually doesn't work? That when you try and command feelings or emotions, it's a hopeless cause. You can't do that. Angry feelings, sad feelings, the feelings of love don't respond to commandments. So if you can't command feelings, what did Jesus intend by when he commanded us to love as he loved us? It must be that the love that Jesus commanded us to have for one another was not an emotion at all, not a feeling at all. When we think of love, we think of where? Valentine's Day, the heart, right? In our age. When the Greeks thought of love, they thought of the love of forms, which is all in your head. But when the Hebrews had it right, when the Hebrews talked about love, they said love was not in the heart, not in the head. Love was in the guts. Love was a decision. It wasn't an emotion. It wasn't a fiction. It was a decision, regardless of how they felt emotionally. That's how Christ could command us to love our enemies. Nobody loves our enemies naturally, but by a decision of the will and with the power of God's Spirit, we can do it. He doesn't mean we should turn ourselves upside down trying to wamp up nice warm feelings for those who hate us or those who have hurt us. To love your enemies means to decide to love them, to forgive them, to act toward them in a loving way. And that's hard. I mean, whoever said love was easy? Love is hard work sometimes. One of my favorite books, The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck, he says this: real love is either an act of courage or an act of work. It is either the work of extending ourselves for another person in opposition to our own laziness, or the courage to move out in the face of our own fears. And then he concludes, if it's not an act of courage and it's not an act of work, then it's not an act of love. Well, you say, how can I love when I don't feel it? How can I muster the courage of love to do the work of love my heart isn't in it. To that I would say two things. First of all, remember that Jesus gave us the great commandment. It was not the great request, nor the great suggestion. It was the great commandment. If you want to be a follower of Jesus, we'll remember how much Christ has done for us, and we will work at loving each other. If it takes work, if it takes courage, whatever it takes, especially when you don't feel like it, because Jesus commands us to do so. And he says love will be the sign, will be the unmistakable symptom of true discipleship. He says, by this, all people will know that you are my disciple, if you have love for one another. If you want to fulfill the great command to love one another, you have to do the exact opposite of what your nature tells you. To strike the original match, to pay it forward. Lewis gives good advice to Christians who want to carry out Christ's great commandment to love. He says this, don't waste your time worrying about whether you have warm feeling for someone. That's beyond your control anyway. Ask yourself this question, if I did love them, how would I treat them? And then to decide to treat them that way as if you love them. And he adds, here's a great secret. When you treat people lovingly, regardless of how you feel about them, often your feelings about them will change. And in time, you will come to have loving feelings for them. Kind of a paradox. Newspaper columnist and pastor George Crane tells of a woman who came into his office to receive counseling one day, and she was just livid. She was so angry at her husband. She said, I am not only going to get rid of him, but I want to get even. I want a divorce, and I want to hurt him as much as he's hurt me. And Pastor Crane, being a wise counselor, came up with an ingenious plan. He said, go home and act as if you really love your husband. She said, what? Tell him how much he means to you. Praise him for every decent trait that he has. Go out of your way to be kind to him, to be considerate, to be as generous as possible. Spare no efforts to please him, to enjoy him. Make him believe that you really love him. And after you've convinced him of your undying love and that you can't live without him, then you can drop the bomb on him that you're getting a divorce. It'll absolutely destroy him. And she thought, oh, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And so she went home and she took the doctor's prescription. For 2 months, she showed love and kindness and generosity and giving and sharing. And after about 2 months, the pastor realized that she hadn't called back. And that had been beyond the date where she was going to drop the bomb on him. And so he called her and he said, didn't it work? Why didn't you come through to process your divorce? And the woman said, divorce? I could never divorce him. I love him. I really do love him. Her actions changed her will and changed her emotions and her affections. Going through the motions of love resulted in the emotions taking place. See, society tells us that love is like a candle. That once you blow it out, it stays out. But Jesus tells us that love is not like a candle. Love it's a matter of the gut. It's a decision of the will. It's the one unmistakable mark of the discipleship of Christ. And when people see you living out the life of Christ, the love of Christ in your life, they will be drawn to him. Now, I wanted to tell you that you are called to light the first match. And let God do the rest. My daughter Julia came home after being in Prague. She was sequestered for 2 weeks, and now she is home. And we're delighted to have her here. Let me see if I can get this. And I've asked her to sing a song that she wrote about the love of Christ lived in and out of communion.
Nope, the camera.
Okay.
Technical difficulties.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry. Take two.
You took my punishment. You took the penalty for my sin. You took the torture that I deserve. You took death upon a cross, 'cause God so loved the world. This is my body broken for you. This is my blood poured out for you. This is my body broken for you. Yeah, this is my blood poured out for you. You claimed my shame and brokenness. You claimed my guilt despite your innocence. You gave your blood in exchange for my own. You gave your life so I could come home. Then you rose to life again. Evil thought it had won, but you rose to life again. Jesus.